So to be divinely feminine is really feeling and understanding that we are divine expressions of whatever you want to call this word, God, Goddess, Creator, Creatrix, all that is, I am presence, Shiva Shakti, unconditional love, source, the almighty Om, whatever that word is for you, that higher, powerful energy. We are that, and the divine feminine taps into that energy, and that energy is erotic. I'll use that word just to provoke a few of your listeners. It's erotic.
I'm Casey Main, a jaded, hopelessly romantic, health-conscious party girl searching for meaning. And my mission is simple: to make life better, for myself and for you. I believe real change always comes from within, and the Better You podcast was born to discover hidden parts of ourselves and our stories. A safe place where we have real, honest conversations with people from all walks of life to help better understand ourselves so we can become better versions of ourselves. So come along on this journey of discovery with me so you can become a better you. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Better You podcast. I am your host, Casey Main. As always, I want to take a minute to thank you so much for tuning into the show. I know that there are just so many options with how you spend your time. There's all kinds of things pulling at you, whether it be work responsibilities, family, friends, kids, significant others, other things you feel like you need to be reading or listening to or watching, just so much. Everyone is vying for our time these days, and it's very, very precious. And so I'm very grateful that you've chosen to spend your time with me and the podcast. I'm very excited about today's conversation. It is another spiritual one, and it is a great follow-up to last week's episode with Morgan. So if you have not listened to that yet, I definitely recommend that you do. There's a lot of kind of overlap in our conversation. So Morgan and I talked a lot about just how hard kind of the spiritual work can be. It's just a very real, honest conversation about the spiritual journey. And if you start to go down this road, there are times where you're definitely contracting. I kind of talk about how I'm definitely in one of those modes right now. And you can feel all this pressure to constantly be all like, oh, love and light and everything's great. But I mean, the truth is we still have to live in this world and interact with people and coworkers and family and friends. And then there's bigger picture things going on, like a pandemic and a whole big movement for equality. And so it's a lot. It's a lot of heavy stuff. And so to think that, you can kind of just float through this meditating isn't realistic. So I so appreciated that conversation. And then this conversation is just such a great follow-up. We talk a lot about shadows, and today's guest actually gives like a step-by-step process to, I'm not going to say overcome the shadows, but not even really even heal, more like transform them. So like a new way of seeing your shadows, or the parts of you that you find difficult to deal with or are ashamed of or struggle with. And we kind of have this mentality of like, oh, I need to overcome this. And she gives a really great, like a new way of looking at it, which I very much appreciate. I do want to give just a little bit heads up though, because this is a spiritual one, that it does require an open mind. So if you are very ingrained in a certain religion and really kind of hold tight to those religious beliefs, which is totally fine and wonderful, just a heads up that there are some parts of this conversation that might trigger you a little bit. So just everyone, open mind, please. And we do talk a lot about masculine and feminine energies. So if you enjoy that part of the conversation and you haven't listened to the episode with Katie Buman yet, it's called Embracing the Real Rebel Within You, then I definitely recommend you check out that episode because we get into that as well. And you'll hear that today's guest is the one who recommended that I read the book White Fragility, which has really just opened my mind a lot. And I don't know, if you're white and you're feeling like the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't really pertain to you because you're not racist and you're a good person and you're nice to everybody, which is kind of how I was feeling, to be completely honest, this is a really great book to read if you're okay with, again, opening your mind and then also getting a little bit uncomfortable with learning some things about yourself or looking at things in a way that you've never looked at before. So she recommended that book to me. I've since read it. I'm probably definitely going to read it again because it's a lot to take in, and I don't know, it's a book worth a couple times reading through to really make sure it all absorbs and figure out how to integrate it into your life. As far as next week, we're going to kind of stay on the spiritual train a little bit because I'm so excited. I was able to get Erin Claire Jones, who is an expert in human design, to come on the show. I've had a couple listeners reach out and request that we do an episode on human design, and I was so grateful to be able to get her. So that will be next week's episode. If you're not familiar with human design, I recommend that you Google it and look up your human design chart. And I'll go through all of this in the intro for next week too. And she actually gives us a discount code, which I'm super excited about, to order like a full blueprint, which helps explain your specific human design. So make sure you are subscribed to the show and listen to next week so you don't miss that. It's a little bit similar. Human design is similar to gene keys, which we did a previous episode on with Paul, but Paul and the gene keys, that's kind of almost like a higher level, like kind of more conceptual view of ourselves, whereas human design gives very practical applications for like kind of how you navigate life and how you make decisions. So it's such a good conversation. And I've listened to a couple podcast episodes on human design, but we got into an area of it that I had never really heard about or really dug into before that I just found so super helpful. So make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss that. All right, so let's talk about today's guest. Her name is Coltrane Lord, and she is a Chopra certified Ayurvedic educator, licensed S-Factor instructor, mystic, archetype consultant, accomplished photographer, and best-selling authoress. She is also a student of Vedanta, and I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, Jungian psychology, and goddess philosophy. Coltrane is an explorer and experimenter of both esoteric and exoteric healing modalities. She has embodied her own spiritual awakening, which allows her to be guided by the abundant and all-loving universe. All right, so let's get into some woo-woo stuff. So in this episode, we discuss her story and how a betrayal of trust in a relationship sent her down a spiritual path of self-discovery, how shame surrounds the one thing that holds so much of our power, which is our sexuality, the relationship between the divine feminine, sexuality, masculine and feminine energy, what the Adam and Eve story teaches us about feminine and masculine energy, the upcoming Age of Aquarius and what our role is in the transition into it, the relationship between self-work and helping others and what that means for how to best tackle changing the world, how true spiritual work must include involvement in what's going on in the world, a step-by-step process to use our shadows to heal and create and transform, and how to use everyday interactions as a mirror to learn more about ourselves and then do the self-work to help change that reflection. If you enjoyed this episode or have been enjoying the podcast, then I have a favor to ask. There are a couple things you can do to really help me grow the show. That would be to share with friends. So that's how a lot of us find podcasts, is a friend sends it to you, you listen to it, and you're like, oh, I like this, and then maybe you continue listening. So if you've got friends that you think would relate to this episode or previous episodes, then please go ahead and send them the podcast, recommend that they listen. You can also share it on your socials. That would be amazing. The podcast is on Facebook and Instagram at The Better You Podcast, but whatever social you're on, screenshot, post it up there, tag me if you can. That would be awesome. And then also rating and review. That helps a lot in the podcast algorithm world, especially if you are listening on an iPhone in the Apple Podcast app. Then going in there and writing a short review just really helps tremendously. So if you do one of those things or all of those things, I would be very, very grateful and just so appreciate it. And it will help me grow the show so that I can continue to do this. All right, so that's it. We're going to go ahead and jump into this conversation with Coltrane. Let's start with just like a little bit of your background and your a little bit of your story and kind of how you got into this work.
Yeah, so I have a background in Vedic philosophy and Ayurvedic wisdom, which is the same thing. I also have a lot of knowledge in relationships, and I had my own spiritual awakening, which only enhanced the journey of tapping into divine feminine wisdom, which is what I teach women to do. And it first started actually with a very material, very common thing that happens to women, which was a betrayal in my long-term marriage. And what happened was, as I was going through my journey to heal myself and to figure out what was quote unquote wrong with me, I discovered that I had a lot of childhood wounds that I had never addressed. And it just opened up a can of worms that I needed to look at in order for me to heal myself and actually save my marriage. And so that journey was very interesting because I had to go deep, deep into the soul of me and uncover every shame and every guilt and every fear I had in order to even look at what was happening in my life at the moment. So that's how it started. And then as I started on this path to awakening, the first thing that happens to you when you are betrayed intimately is you talk about sex. And I hope I can talk about this.
Oh my God, absolutely.
Now.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the first thing you do is you go, okay, am I asexual? Like or non-sexual, I should say. And so I went down that path to awaken. And then you realize like, oh God, I am a little bit frozen because of this childhood wound and the society that we live in and this rape culture and this idea of what beauty should be. And as I started to discover myself and open myself even more, I realized that, wow, even tapping into this sexual energy at a higher level and a higher, more spiritual level, boom, wakes you up to divineness, I'm going to say. And then I started getting a lot of downloads. That's what we call it, downloads, and information that I had never had before. And so that's when I started really studying the esoteric philosophies and just validating what I was experiencing physically. So that's how I got into this my passion to amplify love, to have women tap into their divine feminine essence, because we all have it. We all have magic. We all can activate it. We just don't have a guide. And sometimes we just don't even know that it's possible.
Yes. Okay. I have 18 million questions.
Yay.
Already just with that intro. Okay. So first, just out of curiosity, you say you kind of went down this journey of like self-discovery and really kind of going into yourself. Did you do that on your own? Did you go to a therapist? Like, how did you go about that process?
Yeah. So I started off going to the traditional route, right? Therapy, talk therapy. And I will not discount talk therapy, but we have a mind, a body, and a soul, right? And so talk therapy to me really allows you to talk it out. And sometimes if you're not going into the body where your memories are stored, or if you're going into the soul where you're learning deeply what these lessons are, you're just kind of regurgitating what happened to you. And which there's a place for it, but the integration and the digestion wasn't there for me. And I started getting sick of myself, quite frankly. And so then I decided I was getting sick of my story. I wasn't healing. I mean, I do therapy still. I still need that bouncing off of ideas, but now I know how to integrate it. Now I know how to transform the story. And it was a solo journey, and I wish I had someone to take me on their journey. I went down the rabbit hole. I explored everything. I did take class after class after class, and I took classes on sexuality. So I did a lot of tantra work. I went into workshops on feminine energy, and I found that a lot of the men that were teaching women how to be feminine, at first I thought, okay, this is what I got to learn. But then I realized, how do you know what I need? You're just teaching me how to be what you want me to be. That's how I felt. And I felt really kind of offended. And but I have an open mind and an open heart. And I just took what I needed from these things and kind of developed my own process, what worked for me. And actually, I had to replace that masculine, or the male, because it wasn't so masculine to me, male guru, and place an image of what I thought was the divine masculine, and then work with that kind of energy. So it was really discovering me first to see what resonated with me with all these gurus that I actually went to and tried to learn from. So I did a lot of things, though. I mean, really a lot of things. My first book that I wrote was called The Kinky Vanilla Love Project. That doesn't sound very spiritual, but it's the going from betrayal to bliss. However, it was sexual, right? It was, how do I find out what is wrong sexually with me? So I did spend even time learning from the dominatrix world, because I wanted to see what is going on in all these sexual expressions. And what I pulled from that was, okay, it's not my world. However, the essence of some of the polarity teachings were profound to work in relationships, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And so I find it super interesting that you kind of dove into the sexuality part of it, because I'm with you. I think that is hugely important, and especially, and we're going to talk more about like divine feminine and divine feminine wisdom and everything, but given culture and society and programming we've all grown up with, like, we are very much taught to kind of stifle that. There's a lot of shame messages there. Like, it's a very complicated, deep rooted issue. And I don't know that everyone even thinks to go there. So like, why did you go there? Like, and if you're comfortable, share a little bit about, like, you kind of mentioned your first thought was like, oh, am I non-sexual? Like, I'm assuming, like, you and your marriage, like, you guys weren't having sex, or was it just not good? Or like, why was that an element you were so aware of?
So for me, how do I explain this without, I don't want anyone to feel like this experience will, a betrayal will just rip them apart. And some people actually don't get offended by that, right? For me personally, just because of my upbringing, it was the thing that would kill me the most. I was raised with a rageaholic father, so we were threatened by the belts. He had guns to my mother's head. And so danger of physical, interestingly enough, I felt like, he had his own PTSD. He had his own experiences, my father, his own experiences. So oddly, I didn't think that was about me. I thought that was about his rage. But when he had an affair and had another family, I thought that was about me. So I wasn't going to have that happen to me in my marriage. And I feel like it was divinely guided so I could be on this journey, really, to be quite honest. And so sexually, like, when someone has an affair, they have sex with another person. So that was the first thing I went to. Like, I'm probably shut down. I need to go check that out. And so I went the sex route, thinking I'm a nice person. I'm smart. What else could it be? It must be this. It must be sex, right? And so that's what I focused on. What I found was that, yes, I was very ashamed because I grew up Catholic. So ashamed. I grew up abused, so shut down. So there was a lot of things that I positively knew. Yes, my part of the shutdown was there, but that's not the only part, right? In any betrayal, that's not always the only part, but that's what I was focusing on at the time. And then I realized there is so much shame around sex. And it is also, through my journey, the very thing that creates life. It is the very power of a woman. And so we should not at all be ashamed of our sexuality. And that's why I decided to write a book about my betrayal, and a book, that would just disclose everything, because I decided that I was going to be that beacon of hope for women to not be ashamed of their sexuality from someone who was completely ashamed of their sexuality. And once we open up to that, there is magic. That is the only way, I will say, to be divinely feminine. It is our power. It is our magic. It is our birthright. And this culture shames it, rapes it, puts it down. And now look at what's going on in the world. A bunch of, just really unconscious masculine as an energy, not the person, unconscious masculine energy that puts down the very force and the very loving quality that the feminine energy, with all its sexual energy, spreads love that way.
Okay. I love it. I get goosebumps. I literally still have them as you talk about how sexuality is our power and everything. So, but for listeners who might not be as familiar with it, like, explain, what do you mean by divine feminine? And then kind of what is that relationship with sexuality?
So thank you for this question. It's hard to explain, but I'm going to try to explain it. We have some people, when they think of divine feminine, it's very confusing, because it might be, to some people, empowerment. Like, I'm just empowered. And I have equality in the world. You see me in the world. And sometimes those hidden and forbidden parts of us, which are our shadow parts, we don't add into that, right? So, which is our sexuality. A lot of it is in our sexuality. So to be divinely feminine is really feeling and understanding that we are divine expressions of whatever you want to call this word: God, goddess, creator, creatrix, all that is, I am presence, Shiva Shakti, unconditional love, source, that, the almighty Om, whatever that word is for you, that higher, powerful energy we are that. And the divine feminine taps into that energy. And that energy is erotic. I'll use that word just to provoke a little few of your listeners. It's erotic. And I'll explain why it's erotic, because the Big Bang Theory, right? At least in esoteric philosophy, unity consciousness, there was this space of no thing, pure consciousness. And in the universe, in science, it's called dark matter. They know it's there. It's 99.99% of the universe. There's dark matter. And from the dark matter, from the space of no thing, erupts the universe, erupts the everything. If consciousness or potential is a masculine energy, then the feminine is the everything energy. We are creation. We are everything. And so, but in order for this manifestation to occur, there has to be desire. There has to be tension. There has to be polarity. And that chaotic mix, which is, if I use those metaphors, passionate mix, desire, creates the everything. We surrender into the everything. That's the same exact vocabulary we would use for intimacy. The tension between two people, the desire, the surrender, the explosion. That's why I use the word erotic.
Okay. All right. I love that. And we've talked about masculine and feminine energy in a previous episode, but I've never heard it positioned as the masculine energy as potential, and then the feminine energy as creation, which, yes, to your point, must include desire, because the potential for something can be there, but you've got to have the desire to create it, before anything is created. I love that.
Yeah. So, in science, the scientific version of manifestation, like anything that is created, needs to have polarity. I'm going to ask your readers to look it up so I don't have to explain it to you here. But example would be, you have the sperm, which is a masculine energy, just easy, right? And then the egg, which is going to be the feminine energy, and this sperm will penetrate the egg to become another thing. Right? There's just one metaphor, one metaphor. And there has to be a particle mixed with another particle to create a new thing. There has to be a negative energy and a positive energy to create matter. So negative would be feminine and positive would be masculine. So these are all just metaphorical terms to offer the creation theory. In a lot of creation myths, right? You've heard consciousness wanted to experience itself, and so had that desire, and then boom, here it is. And before there was anything, there was the word, but then there was the desire, and then boom, there's creation. So it's yes, and how else do I explain it? Like in the womb space of a woman, there's that seed of potential. It implants, and then we as women gestate, create, and birth life. So there's a lot of power in that expression too. So yes, it manifests down. We can get smaller and smaller and smaller and cut the metaphor down to masculine essence in a human body and feminine essence in a human body. In each individual being, whether you're female, biological female, or biologically male, each of us has both energies. And it's my belief that actually the feminine energy activates the higher masculine energy. And that's why it's so important to me to have women at least activate their higher version of their feminine energies to resurrect their masculine energy within themselves before they can activate the masculine energy in a biological man. And resurrect, I mean higher version. We all have this energy. It's either unconscious or conscious. We want to get conscious.
So in my previous conversation about these energies, we talked about how the masculine energy has been more prominent for quite some time now. Would you agree with that as well? Like just from an overall kind of society standpoint?
Oh God, for the last, for thousands of years, when, one has to look at, I'm going to talk about this metaphorically, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
The patriarchal culture has been here for thousands of years. And if we look at the metaphor of Adam and Eve, for instance, Adam and Eve, it shows the masculine and feminine, right? But what does the story of Adam and Eve show you? It shows us that the feminine energy is curious. The feminine energy is a little naughty. She goes and takes the fruit and eats it when she's not supposed to, right? And so we dive down into the original sin, which actually happened because a feminine energy ate it while this masculine guy just kind of hung out and listened to her, right? What is gone from that story is the story of Lilith, who was supposedly Adam's first partner. And the story of Lilith is she was the wild, powerful, sexual counterpart equal to Adam. And what she refused to do was lay beneath him in submission, and she wanted equality. So then he didn't want that. She was banished from Eden, and then then you don't hear about her again. My version is Adam. This is my version. But Lilith and Eve are actually one being. Like we're all in the goddess philosophy. We are all aspects of the one, and so she kindly split herself in two as Eve to give the masculine a moment in time, which happened to be a little too long, moment in time to know himself. And he just got a little too greedy and got a little too power hungry. And it's now this. We want to reclaim our fullness as women, as the feminine, and not take over, but take over our power within us. Because in the 3D world, because I've been talking esoterically, when we marched on Washington, there was no violence. There was no violence, right? There was just a beautiful, beautiful group of women sharing their hearts. We can inspire that the more women wake up to their own divinity and their own divine feminine, and then men too. I'm talking about unconscious men, not conscious men, because there's a lot of conscious men out there.
Right. And that's where sometimes I can get even tripped up by the words of, divine feminine, but we're talking about an energy which lives in all biological genders.
And all of life.
Right.
It's in everything. Yeah, it's in everything. Yes, it's in everything. And so it is very hard. We can call it yin and yang. Yin is the feminine and yang is the masculine. We can call it polarity. I like to sometimes call it predator and prey, just for fun. Because it's it's just the animal instincts in us, like the predator goes out and gets, and the prey like surrenders to her death, that kind of energy. But yes, the masculine energy, the patriarchal, I'm going to call it patriarchal instead of masculine. The patriarchal energy has been around for a long time. And we're entering into the Age of Aquarius, where right now we are being called to awaken to our divine essence so that we can usher in a new world. And outside of our walls right now, and we are seeing so much violence and so much need for the unconscious human being to wake up to their divinity so that everyone on this planet could feel that they have the dignity and the humanity and the equality that is everyone's birthright. And so we're just basically shaking it all out right now so that we can all wake up to end this madness, if you will.
Yeah. So I love that. And I love that you brought that up. And I don't know what these, like how we're entering into the Age of Aquarius. Is that an astrology thing? Or?
Yeah, so there's this great video I'd love every one of your readers to watch. It's called The Great Year, and it's narrated by gosh, I'm blanking right now. I'm so sorry. Darth Vader's voice. Do you remember his name?
James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones. Sorry, James Earl Jones. I love his voice. And it's narrated by him. And it has scientists, quantum physicists, scientists, astrologists, mystics, astronomers that talk about the astronomy and astrology of our solar system and how it affects timelines and what the ages were. And so in terms of the astrological or astronomical timeline, we are supposed to be entering into the Age of Aquarius, which is the golden age, which is back to 24,000 years ago, the age of the goddess. That's why we're feeling all this, that's why it's in our awareness. You're hearing goddess, you're hearing Isis, you're hearing Kali, you're hearing all these words that we've not heard before, and it's coming back to us.
All right. I love that. And that's very exciting and hopeful to hear. But here's my fear, because I know usually the way these timelines go, I mean, it's thousands of years. So like, how long are we going to be in this very uncomfortable, painful shakeout process?
I wish I knew that, but what we want to do with divine feminine energy is really flow with this and really take our bodies out of fear with this and be in right action. If that makes right action is, how do I get rid of the fear and get rid of the shame and use this as fuel to create my own transformation, which will inspire the transformation of others. And when you're fully aligned and have transformed your own shadows, then you're clear, absolutely clear of what you need to do next, which is always, if you're in your divine alignment, it's always for all of humanity. It's unconditional love. So some of the people that I work with right now are just on pause, right? They're on pause because there's so much fear out there. And there's fear out there, and it's horrid. So the opportunity now is to really go into the self so that you can help, so that we can create, so that we create something new.
Yes, I love that you said that, because that is something that I've really kind of keep coming back to, and is really the point of this podcast, is to help people go into themselves and better understand themselves. And I think sometimes in times like this, it's very easy to think that isn't enough. You got to go out and do. But I don't know. I still feel very tied to what you just said, that like change starts with us. And so we've got to get right within ourselves. And then, because our world is so connected, we are all connected. We're connected to life. It's all, the oneness concept, that in itself will help change the world.
Yes. So now, since there's an urgent need, I feel like what we do now, for any listeners who have tapped into themselves, wherever you are at right now, the alignment piece, meaning whatever you are so sure of in yourself right now, are you creative? Are you filled with love? Are you unafraid? Whatever that energy is that you are positively sure that it is connected to you and aligned with you, you can use that energy for your doing. Right? There are pieces of us that I know I'm a creative person. I can creatively help someone do something, and I could use my creativity to write a book and help people see themselves, right? I know that I have love energy, so I could love the people that are being effective directly at this moment. I have a little sacred rebel in me, so I have already joined the Grassroots Law Project, and I'm trying to find out where the discrepancies are, and trying to ask politicians to help us in this movement. So we all could do something,
yes,
but we don't want it to be unaligned with us, because then it brings up triggers and fears. So if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it totally does. So, okay. Cause like for me, and I probably don't know as much about myself as you do about yourself, but I know that I am a communicator. So,
right.
This podcast, writing, and I know that I am naturally very curious, very open-minded. I like to try and understand, and I like to try and get to like the root and the truth of things. So like the way I'm trying to use that is tackling my first kind of, I guess I'll call it investigative journalism piece, looking at inequality and injustice within my community. I've never written a piece like this, so it's a whole new ball game for me. But because I do believe in, when we start to understand something better, it becomes less overwhelming, or at least helps with empathy, because I think with empathy comes a lot of healing. So that makes sense, of kind of know your strengths and your lanes, so to speak, and then make sure, because that will help keep you in alignment with yourself in how you,
and what you say and what you say and what you do. Absolutely. There's a book I'd love to that I just finished reading, and it's being promoted everywhere right now, but I feel like at this time, not just talking about myself, but also talking about what's relevant right now. But for you probably, or some of your listeners, White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is so good, because it is a white woman's viewpoint on how she sees the subtlety of what is racist and what is not racist. And it's every person who is not Black should read this book. And then the other books also, like
Yes.
the other books also. But the reason why I say this book for some people who feel a little bit disconnected is because it's going to connect you. It's going to make you realize your own bias. And then it is imperative to read the other books, Between the World and Me, and I want to talk about racism, things like that, those books. And I'm promoting them before my book because I really think that right now that's important.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I just downloaded White Supremacy and Me on Audible. I haven't started it yet. I just downloaded it earlier.
Yeah. And that's in alignment, right? The reading and educating yourself is in alignment with your readers or your listeners, because if you haven't gone down into the shadow places of ourselves, we got to educate ourselves. That's great. That's amazing, right? That's really a good start.
Right. Because I'm just very, like, I can sit here and say till I'm blue in the face, like, I'm not racist. I don't have bias. I'm all but love. And I see everyone as equal. But here's what I also know. I don't know what I don't know. And I only know my perspective. I only know what it's like to walk through this world as me. And that's not the full picture. So,
right.
So I do believe.
Yeah. And for some of your readers or listeners, sorry, I keep saying that. Some of your listeners who are on the spiritual path, I consider myself on the spiritual path. The goal of being spiritual and being a spirit in the human body is that we are spirits in a human body. And we cannot forget about the body and the earth and our place right now on this planet. So walking heaven on earth, bringing heaven to earth, doesn't mean you stay in the la land of spiritual yay yummy goodness. It means there's real stuff happening on the earth plane. And when we bring that energy from the fifth dimension down, which is unconditional love, down into our being and land it here on earth, and then have that back our doing, have that influence our doing, it helps us more be unafraid. It helps us to be active with right action and loving action. And it helps us on the three-dimensional earth plane reality. There's racism in the world. Let's get to it.
Yes. Okay.
It's both. It's living both. It's heaven on earth is living your spiritual life on the material plane, because we are here in this body right now.
Yes, I love that, which kind of ties back to this. I'm just finding more and more a lot of the spiritual journey is really understanding that, like, duality is a human earthly thing, and that actually, like, it's really more about like both and. So it's not, heaven or earth. It's both. Yes,
that's the I think that's what it actually means to be one, is to. And this is actually an amazing metaphor too for the race problem. It's we need diversity. Our life is diverse. We have trees, we have mountains, we have, I don't even know how many thousands of butterflies species there are, right? The world is beautiful because of diversity. And we are all equally special. We are all equally one. So we are all connected in our specialness and in the celebration of our individuality. So it's a very hard concept for people to hold the wholeness, to be holding the tension between the center of duality, between the center of polarity. But that's equanimity, right? The peace within the chaos. And that is an elevated human being, to bring the yin and the yang and the dark and the light into the center, and hold both, and do the right thing from that point.
I love that. Okay. So, and in order to do that, we have to tackle our shadows, which is something, a word that's come up a couple times now. So explain, what are our shadows?
The shadows in my definition, the shadows are our hidden and forbidden parts of ourselves. So they are your fears, your shames, your guilts, right?
Mm.
And your guilty pleasures, even, like, which is sometimes not even sometimes, sexuality is hugely a shadow, because you can't, I mean, there's just so much in our culture that that doesn't allow anybody to be sexual anymore, even men, right? You're a
Oh, yeah.
rapist, you're a harlot. It's so, an elevated sexuality. We talked about this just earlier. The elevated sexuality is the non-shadow side. But the shadows are all of our fears. Like, do you fear being alone? Do you feel being rejected? What are your deepest fears? A lot of people think it's death. That's the biggest fear, and that is for unconscious people. A lot of spiritual people would be fine with death, because they know we're just energy and we never actually die. But
Mm-hmm.
most people do fear the process of dying, because that's painful.
Right. Which is really then fearing pain. And then death is really
Exactly.
more fearing probably the unknown,
Right.
because they don't know what happens afterwards. Whereas more spiritual people usually have very strong beliefs about what happens afterwards.
Yeah. And the unknown in the spiritual world and a spiritual person is the space of infinite possibilities. You create whatever you want in the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
If you float in the unknown, you're just about to go into another magical realm or a miracle or something else that you create if you're conscious about it.
Right.
We're so afraid.
It's kind of exciting. After I read Many Lives, Many Masters, it helped relieve a lot of fear of death, because I'm like, oh, cool. So you kind of either come back here for like another go round, or you elevate up to the next level, but there's like people to help you. And it's this whole process. I was like, that's
amazing.
Not so bad.
Right. It's great. And so so you brought up that book. I love that book. I read it like 25 years ago. I love it. The shadow is also, since you brought up that book, can also be the expressions of your past lives that have not healed in this life. And so we're just learning how to overcome betrayal, for instance, for myself. So I have done a lot of past life regression work and seen some of past lives. I was learning betrayal for a really long time. And it was only this lifetime that I understood what betrayal actually means. So when we look at the shadow of betrayal, what does that mean to me? I want someone to, I want trust. I need trust, right? And so then I have to learn to trust and forgive another person. I have to trust myself. But the bigger, more sacred, more divine lesson is I actually have to trust the divine, and not just the divine up there, the divine in me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we learn that lesson, I will say without a shadow of a doubt, I am unbetrayable right now. Like I will, I cannot be betrayed. I've learned my lesson.
Okay. All right. So let's stick with this theme a little bit. Okay. So and we can use me as an example, because I don't think I've done quite as much work as you have. So I know, and I've known this for a while now, and then it was actually totally reaffirmed when I did in a recent episode, a Gene Keys reading, that rejection is one of my big things to overcome in this life. And it's been like a double whammy. Like I came here with that baggage from a past life, and it's something I've picked up continuously. So is it a matter of like, how do I go about tackling that shadow? Or is it a matter of just fully accepting it? Like, what is the process?
For me, the process is really going under, so you are afraid of rejection. And does that mean to you that you are going to be completely alone? Right. So dissecting what a rejection means to you. Right.
Right. So it used to, I've overcome that.
So and then also understanding that there's all these different levels, right? So the small self, not that you're small, but the small self has this fear of being alone, fear of not being loved. And then as you mature, as you awaken consciously, then it's a little bit bigger. Like I want to have tribe. I want to have partnership, right? It's just the maturity level. But then the higher version is, I think most humans have this fear of rejection, which is really their fear on an unconscious level is their fear of being rejected by divine essence. Because that's all unconditional love. And if you don't feel totally worthy of being unconditionally loved, then you're going to feel you're actually going to create things to reject that, because you have to feel worthy of that much love in order to receive it. And that's where I'll just pop in the golden shadow. The golden shadow is, what if you were that loved? What if you had that much power? What if you could create anything on this planet? What would you do? Would you use your power for good? Would you use your power for bad? What if you were that incredibly powerful?
Why is that called the golden shadow? Because that doesn't seem like a shadow. That seems like a lovely idea.
It seem like, because I think that we are afraid more of our light than we are of our shadow.
Yes. And where else have I read that?
That's Marianne Williamson.
Yes. Okay. Her book, Return to Love, lived in my purse with me for months. I loved that book so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So she, I can't remember her quote, but it's that idea that we could be as beautiful, as powerful, as sexual, as magnificent, as magical, as creative. We have all this at our fingertips in our souls already, but we don't want to shine that much, because what does that even mean? There's no template for it. Right?
So are we afraid of that kind of because of all of our shadows? So, all right. So sticking with, like, I guess just me as the example here. So if I were to, shine in my true potential, then I could be rejected. So it's like that fear of rejection shadow is like what's holding me back from fully stepping into my true potential, because with that always comes like a level of vulnerability.
Yeah, it comes responsibility and vulnerability, and we'll bring back in your past lives, right? So we've been in a patriarchal rule for a very long time. And in past lives, if you keep working on your past lives, I suggest it, there was a matriarchal society, a goddess society. Well, we also had power at one point, and our power was taken away. And so when you were in power in those lifetimes, which is unhealed, right? It's unhealed right now. So what, like, I know it, I feel it, I see it. I remember being, I'll use metaphor, but they aren't metaphors, burnt at the stake, stoned, hung for your power, right? This is also, we fear our power a lot of times because of those energies that are unhealed.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so that does throw a whole other dimension into it when you continuously take into account past lives. So, okay, so how does one go about identifying what their shadows are?
Yeah, so to me, it's simple but not easy, right? So number one would be to really name it and claim it, right? I have fear of rejection, and then really writing it down, like writing all of it down, and why. I think why is good. You might not know your past life why, but you would know your this life why. I have fear of doing things wrong. This is Coltrane now. I fear doing things wrong because I might get hit by a belt, or my dad might leave me. Like that'll stay with me, right? And then I have to go into past lives once I've finished this. But so I've named it and I've claimed it. So it's no longer a shadow. And then I must feel that. What does that feel like to me? Well, my body cringes. My body goes inside. The pit of my stomach pulls into my body. So I'm hunched a little bit. So then I really, really am present with this yucky feeling of shame. I feel like it's shame to me. And I notice my body, I feel it, I go through the pain of it, going through the emotional wheel, right? Understanding that the 88 keys of our emotionality is not to be looked at as a bad thing. It's to be looked at as the thing that allows us to be alive and connected to people. So I might have shame or I might have anger, but my anger and that energy can be transformed into its higher octave version, which anger, for instance, would be transformative. So we add on to like the feelings and the imaginations, really active imagination or using your magical mind, which would be to envision what you do want in the future of what is the opposite side of rejection for you. Being seen, heard, and acceptance, right? Like, what does that actually look like to you? And really going through that process of seeing that, actually creating that in your mind. What would your life be like when you fully were accepted by yourself and then the world? Would you have abundance? Would you have amazing partnership? Would you be, what is it? Really looking at that and then feeling, this is important too. This is why we need to remember how to feel. Feeling that moment as if it's already happened and have gratitude for that moment. Because the universe gives us what we want for positive, and it works on our feelings. So if you want acceptance and you don't feel like you're worthy of it right now, well, guess what your feeling is? It's the feeling of I was hunched over, my gut was pinched, I'm closed a little bit. Well, if you want to know what acceptance feels like, you're going to get a lot of rejection to know because you're still wanting it, right? So then if you decide that this is what acceptance feels like, it feels good, I feel free, I feel liberated, I can breathe, oh my God, I'm so excited, I'm so inspired. Well, the universe is going, oh, inspiration, oh my God, magic, oh my God, creation, let's give her more of that.
Okay. Yeah. I love this because it's kind of a nice little step-by-step process for those of us who tend to be very practical, appreciate that. But it also really like ties together, I don't know, so many like bigger concepts of kind of questioning your fears, like turning it around, and then that feeling aspect, which then goes into, you're right, we have to remember how to feel because a lot of us don't anymore. Probably myself included. That's something I've really been working on because we just build up, these walls and these guards along the way. So, even just like what does it feel like in your body when you're thinking of the shadows, like being able to sit with that discomfort, which we're not good at doing these days either. And then like, what does it feel like if you were to, kind of experience the opposite and all the good stuff and then have gratitude for that? Like, because I've known for a while now that there's power in feeling. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there with gratitude, and if you get into the manifestation stuff that talks about visualizations, but you really got to like feel what it's like. So I knew there was magic in that, but this, I don't know, something about this I really like in terms of addressing those shadows and then kind of flipping the script on them.
Yeah, because that's what they are for, right? How could we learn to love ethically unless we don't have it? Like we wouldn't know the difference. That's what duality is to learn the opposite. And I like to define everything that's negative in its positive light. Meaning, if you have so much grief, then you have so much empathy. You love so much. You have that capacity. You have a deep well of love because you can grieve so much. If you have anger, that anger can transform. Look at what's happening in the world. There's so much anger because we're changing the world right now. And yay, because if we were just complacent, we would elect a president that's in office right now, which is what happened. Right? So unfortunately, if we don't feel the discomfort, we have no idea that we're uncomfortable. And then if we don't know that feeling of unloving or not being loved, then we don't know how far we can love, right? So the more you can tap into each feeling and know for certain there is the opposite feeling, then that's the only way actually you can actually get out of the feeling, is understanding that there's an opposite end. And not shaming yourself, because giving yourself permission to know the feelings that you have, the lower vibrational feelings that you have, in order to rise them up and make them fantastic, right? Everything rises.
That is
or has the potential to.
That is so incredibly helpful. Like, I wish I had known that throughout all of my 20s, when I was constantly in like puddles of tears over rejection, having to do with some relationship, to have had that awareness to be like, well, that's okay, Casey, because that means you are capable of a whole lot of acceptance.
Absolutely. And not only that, every relationship after that has always gotten a little bit better, hasn't it?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Well, there was a downward spiral there for a little bit, but then, yeah, it's climbed back up.
Right. So, and I'll tell you that the downward spiral usually is because you didn't learn the lesson.
Yes.
You didn't take the time to learn the lesson. And so anytime we have a pain or, somebody says something, this is what I do now. Someone says something to me very rude and I go, okay, what am I trying to learn here? Or if everyone's a mirror for us, how am I rude to myself or to any other person? Let me just stop and become a witness to myself and witness to the situation and learn from it right now at this very, very moment, so that I don't go into that tailspin of, oh my God, why was she so rude to me? I can't believe it. I didn't do anything. And and you just go into this small self and you over talk it and you rehash it. But then, wow, that guy called me up and he was so rude and I don't understand it. And then I say, okay, actually, let me see what it is in me that he is reflecting. And actually, I'm not doing such a great job at giving myself kindness right now. I'm actually being rude to myself. How can I give myself a little bit more love? And I've completely forgotten about that comment from that guy, right? I'm so focused within myself. And how can I treat myself a little bit better? And then maybe I'll treat others a little bit better too. And I'm no longer in that tailspin of like just trying to discover what went wrong, what happened. I'm just in the now.
Yes. And that is then changing the reflection. Like, and I can even attest to this because I've started to become more aware of myself doing a similar process of when I find myself internally complaining about things I'm not getting from other people. Well, this person doesn't do this. I've started to turn around and be like, am I giving that to myself? Like, down to even like things within my sex life, to be like, okay, well, am I fully appreciating my own body and exploring my own body? You know what I mean? Like, just everything, I've started to turn it around to myself and then change it. And then it's changing the reflection. Like,
absolutely.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. So in terms of even sexually, this is what I like to say to a lot of women, my clients. If you don't know how to love yourself or how to touch yourself or what you like, how is that person going to know? How are they going to know?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you don't love yourself fully and know what pleases you, how do you expect that person to please you? Because you don't know. So know yourself fully.
Absolutely. I was just writing about that for an article for a new site that's focused on intimacy and couples that's going to be launching soon. But even like deeper than that, of kind of like what to do. Like, if you are not, okay, so like full disclosure. So I've been someone who knows like what to do with myself pretty efficiently, like I can get down to it and get the result. But then but that isn't the same as fully appreciating and like taking the time and you know what I mean? So it's like a deeper level of like, how are you, like, yes, it's one thing to know what you like so somebody else can. Like, if you don't know what you want, then they don't have a chance. But then even those deeper levels of awe and appreciation and exploration, like
Yeah, that's what it's more like how intimate are you with you?
Mm-hmm.
Like how have you explored like a lover your body? Have you explored the tenderness of your soul, the depth of your soul? Like that's where you want to go in order for someone else to go there.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love it. Okay. So I want to close out, and we did talk a lot about kind of the current situation and these points in a kind of a relevant way. But so I want to close out on something similar. What are going back to kind of this practice of identifying our shadows and then really thinking about them, feeling it, trying to, rise them up to the higher levels. What are some ways we can go about that given, the current events and identifying any biased views that we might have? Like how do we take this practice and apply it specifically to current events?
So I think the important thing to do is really sit down with the self. And this is going to be hard for some people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Writing down, like, am I truly, truly comfortable with what's going on right now? What are my fears for being vocal or being silent, right? What list down every single fear you have in for this particular situation. If I say something, somebody might think this. If I don't say something, somebody might think this, right? So basically it's you'll notice, or your listeners will notice, that everyone's worried about the outside world. And then you go in and you say, what do I feel about this? I feel like everyone is equal, should live that way, should feel the dignity of life, right? And so it is still that process of feeling these emotions, and then I have to say, it's like, it's if you don't know what you don't know, so you have to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
When you go on a journey through the depths of your soul, if you don't have help, you actually stumble and fall. And, it's great learning. However, all of us have different experiences, right? So whoever in your life has the experience that you're looking for, has the knowledge that you're looking for, you actually be bold enough and brave enough and vulnerable enough to ask for help. Because you want to do the right thing, and you got to feel it within first. And then this situation that we're in, we all need to work together, right? We all need to work together.
I love that. That's super helpful. Thank you. Tell
Mm-hmm.
everybody where they can find you and your work, follow you. Definitely mention your book and all of that good stuff.
Thank you for that. I will note that I am terrible at social media, but I am going to be better at it because I think we need to. So on Instagram, it's at Lord Coltrane, LordColtrane. And my website is www.lordcoltrane.com. And my book, Love Avatar, Unleash Your Divine Feminine Superpowers and Awaken the Goddess Within, is going to be free. Actually, I know this is going to be recorded later, but it's on Amazon right now. You can look it up.
Oh, fantastic.
And so is the other very first book, which is called The Kinky Vanilla Love Project, A Sexy Soulful Journey from Betrayal to Bliss. And they're kind of related in that one's the 3D version and one is the elevated version, the spiritual version. But
okay. And so the new book is the elevated version, correct?
Love Avatar.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was a super enlightening conversation and very helpful. And I'm 100% going to implement a lot of this into my life because I think it's needed in general, but then especially right now.
Thanks, Casey. It was so good to be here, and I am so grateful that to all your listeners to be awakened. You guys are all the Light Brigade workers here to serve and bring love and light to the world. I appreciate that so much.
We're trying.
Yeah.
Okay, that will do it for this week's episode. Thank you again so much for listening. Again, I ask that if you enjoyed this conversation or you've been enjoying the podcast in general, to please share it with some friends, share it on your socials, or rate and review the podcast. That would just help a lot. And definitely make sure you are subscribed and tune in next week for the conversation with Erin Claire Jones on human design. You can get your human design, like your basic chart, for free on her website, erinclairejones.com. But then she will be giving us a discount code, which I will announce in next week's episode, so that you can get a blueprint, which is like a much deeper dive into your specific chart. So very excited to be able to share that with you all and share the conversation. So again, make sure you don't miss it. And yeah, that is it for this week. Thank you again for listening. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a wonderful week.